So Joe Biden has declared a 28th Amendment has been approved. A 28th Amendment has been ratified. The Equal Rights Amendment. Joe Biden has declared that it is the law of the land now. And he said it really strong and forcefully. But is that the case? Let's take a listen to Joe Biden's remarks about the Equal Rights Amendment.
Just over 100 years ago, a pioneering group of women proposed the Equal Rights Amendment to enshrine the principles of gender equality in our Constitution. Throughout my career, I've been clear. No one should be discriminated against based on their sex. And in order for the amendment to be ratified, it requires 3/4 of the states to ratify it. That benchmark was passed when Virginia ratified the ERA a few years ago.
So did you hear that part where he said that Virginia had ratified it a few years ago? It was actually back in 2017.
Today, I affirm the Equal Rights Amendment to have cleared all the necessary hurdles to be added to the U.S. Constitution now. The Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land now. It's the 28th Amendment to the Constitution now. I consulted dozens of constitutional scholars to make sure that it was all within the power to do this. And the fact is, we did.
So there you go. Joe Biden declares it, so therefore it's the law of the land, right? The Fuhrer has spoken. Now, I agree with the Equal Rights Amendment. The Equal Rights Amendment is pretty crystal clear. It just says that the equality of the rights under the law should not be denied or abridged by the United States of America or by any of the 50 states on account of sex. So if you're a male, you get freedom. If you're a female, you get freedom. The language is pretty crystal clear, and it's really hard to disagree with. I don't know how anybody could disagree with it. I agree with the Equal Rights Amendment 100%. So it's with a heavy heart that I have to say, no, Joe Biden, the 28th Amendment is not the Equal Rights Amendment. Not yet, at least. Now, the way that you pass an amendment, there's several ways that you could do it, but essentially the process that they have followed, this has come from the 1970s, but the process was you get 2/3 of the House and you get 2/3 of the Senate to pass an amendment. Now, that 2/3 supermajority is the same supermajority that you need to override a veto. So here's some lessons about the Constitution. Once you get 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate to pass the amendment, then you're going to have to get 3/4 of the 50 states to pass it, either by legislature or by convention. You got to get 3/4 of the states by convention or 3/4 of the states by legislature to pass the amendment that was passed by Congress. Now, there's a different way to actually propose an Equal Rights Amendment if 2/3 of the state legislatures. So you could either get 2/3 of the House and the Senate or 2/3 of the state legislatures. So far, how the Equal Rights Amendment has proceeded, 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate has passed the amendment. So now you need 3/4 of the 50 states to pass it. Now, going through the history, which I'll go more in detail in a second, but going through the history of it, they had got 35 states to pass it. But when you read the specific language, which I'll read here in a second, of the Equal Rights Resolution that was passed in 1972, it put a 7-year deadline on the thing. So you needed to get 38 states of the 50 states to pass the amendment that both the House and the Senate had passed. And lo and behold, after 7 years, they actually extended it by another 3 years. And then after the 3-year deadline in 1982, only 35 of the 38 states had passed, so therefore it had failed. It had failed. I think you got to start from scratch. I think you got to pass a brand new resolution. Both the House and the Senate has to pass the resolution and either put the deadline on it or don't put the deadline on it. But you got, the 7 years, or you got 10 years to get all the states on board in order to pass it. Let me read the exact wording of the Equal Rights Resolution. Joint resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States relative to equal rights for men and women. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, 2/3 of each house concurring therein, that the following article is proposed as an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states within 7 years from the date of its submission by the Congress. Here's the exact language of the Equal Rights Amendment. This would be the amendment, Article 28, right? So Section 1, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. That sounds pretty crystal clear. That gets right to the point. Are you allowed to discriminate against men? Are you allowed to discriminate against women? No. Everybody has the equality of rights. Who gets to petition? Who gets to speak? Who has the right to bear arms? Who has the right to get a grand jury indictment? Men and women. Section 2 says the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. And then Section 3 says this amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. So within 7 years. Now there's even more problems with what they just said. So you're going to get 35 of the 38 states that were needed to pass by 1982, but it had failed. Well, then in 2017, you had Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia, which had ratified it. So therefore, there's 38 states, right? Actually, no. You had in the intervening years since 1972, some of the states that had ratified it actually pushed back. 4 states rescinded their ratification, and then South Dakota had conditioned their rescinding of the ratification if all the other states did not pass it. So they said that if you didn't get the 2/3 within the 7 years, then they're going to rescind it. So even if you say, well, 3 states up, there's 38 out of 38. Well, you had 5 states that went down. And so therefore you're back to 33 states. Now, since we're going to have, I'm not against Joe Biden doing this and the way that he did it, when it comes to politics, sometimes you got to push a damn thing, 5, 6, 7 times before it actually gets through. Well, if you could just be a Jan Führer, if you could just be a dictator and you could just declare this to be law or that to be law, now we're going to take a look at the Constitution. And I'm very worried about this administration breaking the Constitution, breaking our amendments, breaking our freedoms, and breaking the Constitution. So if they try to pass a 28th Amendment, well, they're going to have to do the same damn process. It's not just going to be the dictator comes out and spits it out, and therefore it's the law of the land. So, close, but no cigar. But since Joe Biden is saying this at the end of his administration, and we got fascism that's going to be descended upon us all, well, then that means that women, if they're smart, and men who think women are equals in terms of rights, politically equal, right? Nobody, let's see, what's the Declaration of Independence? All men are created equal. All men and women are born equal when it comes to political rights. And in terms of equality, we're all born pissing and shitting ourselves. So who has a right to speak? Who has a right to petition? Who has a right to religion? Who has a right to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Amendments? Who's got a right to all the freedoms of the Constitution? Both men and women, both male and female Americans, have all the rights and freedoms that are included in the Constitution of the United States. Now let's talk about some of the history. Let's get down to the specifics. So unfortunately he's wrong, right? With a heavy heart I say that he's wrong, but because he's making a big stink right at the end of his tenure, I think that we probably could get it passed. I think that we could push it and get it passed, and we'll see how these fucking fascists, how they act. We'll see if they'll say that women are equal to men in terms of political rights, which they clearly are. That's given by God. That's common sense. That's by the Constitution. It doesn't exclude